In the fast-changing world of geopolitics, few leaders are walking a tighter rope than India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Middle East today is like a chessboard on fire, with Iran flexing its influence, Israel embroiled in conflict, and the United States trying to shape the outcomes in its favor. For most countries, this is a dangerous arena to even step into. But India cannot afford to stand back because the stakes for New Delhi are higher than ever. Energy security, defense partnerships, trade opportunities, diaspora protection, and strategic balance all collide in the Middle East. The big question now is, how will Modi balance Iran, Israel, and the US when all three hold the keys to India's future ambitions? This is not just a question of foreign policy, okay? It is a test of India's rise on the global stage. Okay, let's begin with the basics. India's dependence on Middle Eastern oil has always been massive. Nearly 60% of India's crude oil imports come from this region, with Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE as top suppliers. For decades, Indian tankers and pipelines have been fueled by the Gulf. But after Western sanctions on Iran and Russia, the energy game has become more complicated. India, while increasing Russian oil imports, cannot ignore its traditional suppliers in the Gulf. At the same time, the U.S. has warned India about overdependence on sanctioned countries like Iran, while offering itself as a strategic partner in technology and defense. So Modi must walk the line between satisfying Washington, keeping relations with Tehran alive, and not losing Israel, India's strongest defense ally in the region. The Iran factor is particularly tricky. India and Iran share deep historical ties, and more importantly, the Chabahar Port project. This port is India's gateway into Afghanistan and Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan. Without Iran, India's vision of connectivity through the international north-south transport corridor collapses. For India, this is not just an economic project, but a geopolitical necessity. However, Iran's growing closeness with Russia and China makes things harder. At the same time, U.S. sanctions on Tehran put India in a tight spot. Whenever India tries to buy more oil from Iran, Washington pressures New Delhi to cut back. Modi knows that alienating Iran would be a mistake, but ignoring the U.S. is equally impossible. So India keeps the Chabahar project alive, investing quietly, while carefully avoiding actions that might anger Washington too much. Now, let's look at Israel. Since Modi's historic visit to Israel in 2017, ties between New Delhi and Tel Aviv have reached unprecedented levels. Defense cooperation, cybersecurity, agriculture technology, water management. Israel offers India tools that few others can match. During the recent Middle East conflicts, India's position has been nuanced. On one hand, India has condemned terrorism and supported Israel's right to defend itself. On the other, it has called for peace and a two-state solution, in line with its traditional support for Palestine. This balancing act shows how Modi is trying to keep both sides open. But the truth is, India sees Israel as a long-term partner in defense technology and intelligence sharing. With growing threats from China and Pakistan, India values Israeli drones, missile systems, and surveillance capabilities. In fact, much of India's modernization and defense has a direct Israeli hand behind it. Modi knows that keeping Israel close is essential. Then comes the United States. For decades, Indo-US ties have gone through ups and downs. But under Modi, the partnership has deepened significantly. From the Quad alliance to critical technology transfers, India and the U.S. are now more aligned than ever against the rise of China. But Washington has its expectations. It wants India to distance itself from Russia, cut down ties with Iran, and fully support Western initiatives. This is where India draws the line. Modi has made it clear that India will not be dictated to, whether it comes to buying Russian oil or engaging with Tehran. India's foreign policy is strategic autonomy, meaning New Delhi will act in its national interest, not under pressure from any power. Still, the U.S. is too important to alienate. From defense deals like fighter jet engines and drones to semiconductor partnerships and clean energy investments, Washington offers New Delhi opportunities that no other country can. The challenge is to take advantage of these opportunities without surrendering independence. So, how is Modi playing this complicated game? The answer lies in balance. When Modi visits Washington, he signs tech and defense deals. When his ministers travel to Tehran, they reaffirm India's commitment to Chabahar. And when Israel faces conflict, India voices support against terrorism while still calling for peace. Each move is carefully calibrated to extract maximum advantage without burning bridges. For a country of India's size and ambition, this is the only way forward. Unlike smaller nations, India cannot afford to choose sides fully because it has too much at stake with each. The diaspora angle adds another layer. Millions of Indians live and work in the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf. Their safety and remittances are critical for India's economy. Any instability in the region directly affects Indian families back home. This is why India's diplomacy in the Middle East is not just about big power politics, but also about protecting its people. Modi knows that if relations sour with any Gulf country, the first victims will be Indian workers. This makes India's balancing act even more sensitive. Now consider the global energy crisis. As the US and Europe push for a green transition, fossil fuel politics are getting sharper. For India, which still relies heavily on oil, this is a vulnerability. Iran offers cheaper oil, Israel offers technology, and the US offers diversification through partnerships. Modi is trying to use all three to shield India from global shocks. For example, even as India buys Russian oil, it continues long-term energy contracts with the Gulf. Even as it deepens ties with Israel, it keeps open the channels with Palestine to maintain credibility in the Arab world. Even as it works with the US, it quietly engages Iran to keep strategic routes open. This is realpolitik in action. But will this strategy work in the long run? Critics argue that India cannot keep balancing forever. At some point, Washington may demand a clear stand, especially if US-Iran tensions escalate further. Similarly, Israel's conflicts may force India into uncomfortable positions, and Iran's alignment with China could undermine India's investments in Chabahar. Yet Modi seems confident that India's growing economic and geopolitical clout will give it enough leverage to keep walking this tightrope. The world needs India as much as India needs the world. That is Modi's bet. The optics also matter. Modi has positioned himself as a global statesman who can talk to everyone: Biden, Putin, Netanyahu, Raisi, and even Xi Jinping when needed. This image of India as a bridge builder gives New Delhi credibility in a fractured world. When conflicts rise, India is seen as a potential mediator. This is why Middle East leaders regularly invite Modi, why Washington courts him, and why Moscow still respects him. India's policy is not to be a camp follower, but a camp maker. And nowhere is this clearer than in the Middle East. Let's think about the future. If India can successfully balance Iran, Israel, and the US, it stands to become not just a regional power, but a global leader. Energy security will be stronger, defense capabilities will be sharper, and diplomatic credibility will be higher. But if the balance fails, India could face sanctions, alienation, or even loss of key projects. This is why every move Modi makes in this region is watched closely. When India abstains at the UN, when it signs port agreements, or when it buys oil from Russia, the entire world takes note. Because India's choices today will shape the global balance tomorrow. At the heart of this story is a vision. Modi wants India to be a Vishwaguru, a global guide, not just a regional power. To achieve that, India must show that it can handle complex rivalries without being crushed by them. The Middle East is the toughest test. If India can emerge successful here, it will prove that it is ready for the superpower club. That is why Modi's big bet on Middle East peace matters to every Indian, and why the world is watching so closely.